Hey guys, welcome to Rosie's Dessert Spot. In this tutorial, I'll be demonstrating how to create this swiped buttercream cake with the fondant petals. I'll be using an 8, a 6 and a 4-inch cake. For your 4-inch and your 6-inch, you're going to need a cake board underneath that. So stick a little cake board onto an acrylic disc or another cake board with some buttercream and into the freezer. Once it's set, start building your cake. This is a 4-inch pre-crumb coated cake that I'm showing you guys here, and it's hybrid buttercream frosting. Recipe will be in the eye or in the description below. Go around with your bench scraper to smooth it down and then start creating your swipes. I've grabbed a larger spatula and I'm creating large swipes from the bottom of my cake to the very top. And the way I'm doing this, because I want them to be super wide, I'm adding a fair amount of pressure and I'm trying to use a lot of the spatula on the cake rather than just the very tip. Once you reach the top of the cake, make sure you try to get a bit of a lip happening, and that way you have something to drag to the middle of the cake to create those sharp edges. Once that's complete, into the freezer she goes for 20 minutes and follow the exact same steps with your 6-inch cake. And the reason we put it into the freezer is that we can handle it with our hands later and it won't damage the frosting. Again, bringing that lip of frosting to the center and into the freezer she goes. The 8-inch cake that you're seeing here is actually a fake cake, but I've coated it in buttercream frosting just like the rest of them. Now that my 6-inch is nice and cold from the freezer, I'm handling it with my hands and straight onto the cake. Because it's a fake cake, it doesn't need any dowels. However, the middle cake is real, and so I'm creating a bit of a support system here with the bubble tea straws. I've cut those flush with the top of the cake and applying some buttercream frosting to stick my top tier on top. Release the cake board from the acrylic disc and place your final tier on the cake. There is going to be a little bit of a gap between each tier, so fill that in with buttercream. Take a small spatula and swipe across, following the previous slope that you already have on there so it all blends through naturally. And that way you can't tell where one began and one ended. Do the same for the 6-inch cake. And now we can start on our petals, but let your cake stay in the fridge for the meantime. As you work on one color, make sure the rest of your fondant is being covered in airtight or at least plastic wrap so it doesn't dry out. And roll your fondant to about 2 millimeters or so in thickness. Cut out little petals with a rose petal cutter. I've cut out 9 petals out of each color. Cover them in plastic wrap while you work on one so they don't dry out, and I'm thinning out the edges with a ball tool and a sponge pad. Go around multiple times around the very edge till it becomes nice and thin and frilly. You can let it rest in a teaspoon. Because there are 9 of each color, I don't have a million teaspoons, so I'm creating my own shape molds with aluminium. So basically I've just scrunched this in my hand and shaped it curved so that it kind of mimics the shape of a teaspoon. Very easy. Follow the exact same steps with all the other petals. The more times you go over the edge, the more frilly it'll be. However, it can break. If that happens, just add a little bit of shortening and knead it through your fondant. That'll make it a bit more flexible and easier to work with. Also, gum paste would be much easier for this if you don't have fondant, and it'll be easier to work with. Onto a tray they all go, and to dry overnight. Once they're nice and dry, use an airbrush to shade in the very edge of each petal. If you don't have an airbrush, what you can do is just use powdered food color and a brush and just lightly shade in the edges. Once that dried off completely, I've gone and started applying petals onto the cake with a little bit of buttercream frosting to stick them on. I've started with red at the very base of the cake and worked my way up to end with purple at the very top. I've arranged them in a diagonal formation. That tends to look really, really nice. But you could totally go straight up, however you like. You are the master of your petal cake. And you're done. And that is how you make a 3-tier swiped buttercream cake decorated with fondant petals in rainbow. I If you guys enjoyed this tutorial and give it a go, or are inspired to create something similar to this, or maybe it's inspired another idea completely, either way, please tag us #RosiesDessertspot on your creation so we can see it as well. And if you haven't subscribed, feel free to do so. We upload a new cake decorating video every Tuesday and a live stream every second Thursday. Thanks again, and I'll catch you next week.